Namaste everybody, Lisa Romano here, the Breakthrough Life Coach, and today I want to help everybody understand the ego a little bit more and how our ego can keep us stuck, and how by thinking more about how the ego comes into play in our daily life and how our beliefs work in conjunction with our ego, and how sometimes outside our ability to really understand it sometimes because we can be triggered. And when we're triggered, we're living in the past, right? We are not thinking, we are not organizing our mind properly, and we become very reactive, and we don't realize that we're unconscious and we're just repeating patterns from the past, which is not what we want to do. So I believe that the most important thing that we can do is organize our mind and learn to use our brain to our advantage, and learn to get clear about what we should be thinking about and what we should not be thinking about. When we are below the veil of consciousness, our minds are ruminating and obsessing about what has been downloaded, which is essentially already dead because it's in the past. But we don't know that, right? So we think we're conscious, but we're really not. And so many of us are still living in the past, still highly triggered, and we don't even realize that that is actually what's happening. I believe that we are meant to grow and expand and be liberated from dank energies like anger and resentment and fear, hostility, abrasiveness, defensiveness. I don't believe that we're supposed to be staying in a place where we're only living in survival. And I think that understanding more about the ego can help us get out of survival and can help our spirits expand and grow. But it's important that we realize that until our mind expands, our spirit can't expand, right? And so let's just take a moment and recognize that every single human being is divine at their core and is a band of love and light energy. On a quantum level, you are light. Everyone is. They just don't know that. That's the quantum level. But on Earth, in this very dank material place, we have to deal with things like the brain, which is subject to our personalities and subject to what's happened to us in our environment. So even though we are these amazing spiritual creatures, we still have to navigate this time-space reality and the matter that is subject to the laws that govern this universe, that is the human brain. We have to recognize that our personality has been built and affected by the environment, and learning to be more objective about our own self, right? They say that to know the self is to experience enlightenment, right? If you know the self, you're pretty good, you're pretty golden. You know, if you know why you do what you do and why you feel the way you feel, if you organize your mind in a healthy way, rather than allowing old programs to run the ship, then you can create a pretty wonderful life experience because you're not hanging on to stuff that's dragging you down. You're no longer attracting people who are on dank frequencies, or you're learning to say, namaste, you know, I'm just not into that gossip, or I'm not into that mindset anymore. I would like to move forward and be of an abundant mindset. You know, until you know why you do what you do, you really can't make choices left or right. You're just going to keep doing what you've always done. And so let's talk a little bit about the id, the ego, and the higher self. And so what I want everybody to understand is that when we break things down and we can consciously and cognitively understand a very complex subject like the personality, it's so much easier for us to like grasp concepts and run with them, right? So there are three layers to the personality, presumably. It's the id, the ego, and some people will say the superego. I like to say that we also have a higher self. We have a higher self that is connected to our innate wisdom, that is connected to our God self, to our own divinity, because we are all extensions of whatever and whoever created this space, which is pretty exciting. But many of us don't feel that way. The id is the aspect of our personality that you can think of as the aspect of your personality that has innate needs to needs for love and comfort, need emotional needs to feel seen and validated, to be touched lovingly. We have these innate needs. We have the need to feel protected. We have the need for shelter and to eat and blah, 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 to survive. Then we have an ego. So the ego, they say, is supposed to begin being formed 3, 4, 5 years old. And the ego is always trying to mitigate the needs of the id, or the infant self, with the environment. So when we're 6 months old and we're crying because we're hungry, we don't know that it's 3 o'clock in the morning. We have no experience of the outside world. We don't know. We don't know that people are sleeping. Our parents are sleeping and they worked all day. We're just hungry, right? So we cry. A 3-year-old understands, and a 4-year-old, 5-year-old knows that their needs have to be mitigated with the external experience. They're old enough to know that maybe mommy's not so happy when she's got to stop watching television and cook us something because we're hungry. Or maybe, daddy's not always happy when he comes home from work and we want a hug. So we've cataloged, right, enough of this information, because we have what's called a memory. We have the ability to download information. And so based on our memory, what's stored in the memory bank, we know, at 3, 4, 5 years old, my needs might hurt me. Expressing my needs might give me more pain. I might net more pain. So maybe I'll just suppress my needs. So that's what the ego is all about. The ego is always trying to preserve the self. Ego is about self-preservation. So the ego has the ability to and wants to protect the needs of the divine inner child, trying to keep us safe. And we do that with an array of defense mechanisms. Some of us resort to running away. Some of us resort to fighting right away. Some of us freeze in the moment we dissociate. And some of us fawn, like as codependents. And so if someone's upset with us, we want to take care of them and we want to try to get back into the good graces. So there's projection, you name it. So there's a bunch of defense mechanisms that the ego can use to mitigate the needs of the id. This is very important that you understand the levels, the id, the ego. Now I want to talk about higher self. So if you're watching this channel, I hope you've subscribed. If you haven't, please do so. This way you can get and if you want to get notified of the next videos, just click the bell. But what I believe most of us, and anybody on this channel, most likely has had this thought, like, why am I here? And I think we're here to more fully integrate to the higher self. So we have this physical body that's subject to this 3D experience, matter, gravity, blah, blah, blah. But it's very unfulfilling if we don't feel like we're living a purposeful life. It's very unfulfilling to just be robotic, go to work, eat, have sex, no emotions, get up, do the same, brush my teeth, go make money, come home, eat, go to sleep. It's a robotic experience. It's very unfulfilling, And so I believe that we're here to have an emotional experience, and our emotions are going to be tied to, our spirituality and the ability that we have to use our emotions to help push us in a direction that is actually fulfilling. So there's a whole lot of stuff in there. We have to learn to love ourselves and trust ourselves, trust our instincts. We've got to learn to really pay attention to red flags, because they're like road signs. There's a whole bunch of stuff, I just said that very easily, like our whole purpose for being born is to move in a direction that allows us to pay attention to how we feel, because what we're trying to do is feel in love, feel abundant, feel in love with the self, feel in love with, creation, feel in love with the universe, feel in love with just the experience of being a human being and moving towards this sense of enlightenment. So it's all about a feeling. But in order to do that and really, really have like a fulfilling life, you've got to learn to organize your mind so that you can appreciate the emotions that you're experiencing, and you can sift through them and you can work with them rather than in reaction to them. So it's important that, we understand that we're moving towards this sense of abundance. We're moving towards this sense of I am enoughness, and so are you. We're moving towards this sense of ease, of non-resistance. We're moving towards the sense of deciding what we will entertain and what we won't, because you have that power. So I want you to imagine that we have the id, we have the ego, and then we have the higher self. So what we have to pay attention to those of us who are on this journey, is we have to pay attention to when and how and where the ego is tripping us up. So if I have a belief that I don't want my ex-husband, let's say, to control me, right? Whatever he shoots at me, whatever he talks about, I'm going to be in defense to. I'm going to be in reaction to. And outside my conscious awareness, I'm going to be stuck. I remember when we first began separating, it took us like 4 years to get divorced, and he tried to ruin me so that I wouldn't date. He said the most god-awful things about me, about my body, about who would want me. I have 3 kids, blah, 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 blah. He went on and on and on. I had all this baggage, and I felt like he was trying to control me. He didn't want me to date. And so what I did was, I did what any strong ego would do. I started dating right away. And it didn't work out well for me. And I didn't realize that in not wanting to be controlled by him, I was being controlled by him, because I really didn't feel ready to date, but I did it anyway because my ego didn't want to feel controlled by him. So I was stuck. I was playing this ego game. And so I attracted very unhealthy relationships. I was unhealthy too, not just these men. Obviously, I was the common denominator. And my life was, in terms of relationships, wasn't getting better. It was getting worse. And then it hit me one day that in all my trying to not be controlled, it was my ego that was working overtime trying to prove him wrong. I'm reminded of a client once who was trying to get her family, and specifically her husband, to recognize how hard she worked in her business. And it was an undercurrent. He kept saying, oh, it's so easy to do this. And in her head, it was like, no, it's not. And I'm going to show you how uneasy it is, how not easy this business is. And what she didn't realize was that her ego was keeping her stuck. And in her defiance of him, much chaos was showing up in her business. And so that lesson is tied to how the universe works on a vibrational level. The universe doesn't speak Chinese and Mandarin and Spanish and Hungarian or Polish. No, the universe is speaking in terms of frequencies. And the frequencies are tied to our beliefs. So if my belief is that my company is not easy to run, if my belief is that I need my husband to validate how hard I work, then what I'm doing is I'm sending this frequency out into the universe that says, my life is chaotic, my business is very difficult to run, there are no good people out there. And in all of this, I don't realize that it's my ego saying, I have to dismiss my husband, I have to prove that he's wrong. I won't know. Like in the case of my client, she didn't realize that she was sending out this signal that was in opposition to what she really wanted to experience. And so wanting to prove her husband wrong, because he kept saying how easy it was, and below the veil, she was seeking his validation. She was trying to create this space where it became so obvious that he was flippant and she was a hard worker. And that goes back to being an invisible, abused adult child who never received validation, who is still seeking validation. And so we have to be very, very careful about our intentions. We have to be very careful about what we're sending out. If we want to be seen as people who are victims, we have to be very careful about that, because I know that I struggled with that. I was waiting for someone to pat me on the back and say, wow, Lisa, your life really sucks, And I didn't realize that I was sending out this frequency that my life sucked. And it wasn't until I began to become much more mindful about my intentions, because I didn't want a life that sucked. I wanted a life that was abundant. I wanted peace. I wanted healthy children. I wanted to attract a healthy relationship. But I didn't realize that on an unconscious level, I was sending out frequencies that were in exact opposition to what I really wanted to experience. So if you're on the recovery path, it may be time for you to have a conversation with your ego. And where higher self comes in is higher self is that aspect of you. And this is very interesting too. I talk about this a lot in my 12-week breakthrough coaching program. It's science. So if I feel powerless, I am in defense mode. If I am in defense mode, and if I am in survival mode, then I am not thinking with the prefrontal lobe and the neocortex. When I am calm and I am non-resistant, then I am able to think in a way that is much more organized. I can activate the prefrontal lobe and the neocortex. Ideas come to me. Suddenly I'm attracting things that I really want. I'm making different decisions. And so your higher self, you can tie your higher self to your third eye. Think about the ego, the id, the ego, and the higher self. So when you begin to see yourself, think about opening up your third eye. Higher self, I associate higher self with my third eye. So when I activate my third eye, I can see the lower aspects of me, the more dank aspects of me, the more earthly aspects of me that have been affected by other earthlings, wounded earthlings, and experiences and whatnot. And so we can look at that. You can think about your higher self in terms of the third eye. When you are observing your actions and your behavior, you are experiencing like prefrontal lobe and neocortex brain activity. When you are in defensive mode and you're hypervigilant and you're resentful, or you're angry, or trying to punish people, or you're in fear, or you're in shame, or you're in guilt, you are in the amygdala. And the amygdala, to me, you have two amygdala. One is above each ear, right behind the ear, right alongside the ear, and we have one on each side. They're almond shaped. And what happens, I think about the amygdala as blinders on a horse, right? So, and it's funny, they're right in alignment with where blinders on a horse would be. But the third eye, we associate the third eye with the brow, and that's out in front, right? So it's very interesting that when you think about the prefrontal lobe or the neocortex, you associate that to the third eye, which is all-knowing, right? You can see how wonderful it could be if we had conversations with ourselves and our egos and even our id, the infant part of us, the very childlike part of us that feels so wounded and abandoned. Imagine having a higher self conversation with your id or with your ego. And so I really hope that this video has inspired many of you to think about the way you show up. Try to figure out if your ego is trying to prove someone wrong. When you get caught in pissing matches, you're stuck. So the goal is to live in non-resistance to what is happening. The goal is to figure out what we want to experience and do what we can to stay in that vibration and to imagine what we want to experience, which means that we have to, in some cases, ignore what's happening around us. When I was a single mom and I didn't have a job, I worked very hard at imagining that I had the job that I wanted. And I didn't even know what that job was, but I knew how I wanted to feel. Living a deliberate life requires a pledge to respect the laws that govern this universe. I have surrendered. I have bowed to the universe. I have kneeled to the universe. I get it. I am not in control. I didn't design this planet. I didn't create these rules. But if I can come into alignment with the rules that govern this universe, I can experience serendipity and miracles, and I can accept that I have some co-creative control over at least how I feel. And if I can focus on how I feel, then I can create a pretty amazing life. That is a life of non-attachment. That is a life of ease, and I can build a life that suits me and suits my spirit and suits me and how I want to feel on an emotional level. So be willing to observe what areas of your life are tripping you up. Ask yourself, where is my ego trying to prove someone else wrong? Where am I seeking validation? Where am I kicking and screaming? Where am I in my life not accepting something? Where in my life am I looking to be seen as a martyr? Where in my life am I looking to be validated and to be seen as special? Where am I in my life that I'm angry that I'm not getting what I think I should have gotten? Where in my life am I envious or jealous of somebody? Where in my life is my ego trying to prove to other people that I am good enough? Now, once you write all these things down, imagine that your higher self is having a conversation with you. And remember, higher self is all about love. It's all about, you're fine, you don't have to prove yourself to anybody. Yes, your life has been difficult. I see that and you know that. It's okay. Just focus on loving yourself. You are enough. What can you control today? What are we going to do today? What changes can we make happen today? What can we let go of? What vibration can we pay attention to that's going to make you feel more abundant? For me, the vibration that I seek every day, all day, is ease and love and gratitude. The quickest way to experience non-resistance is by learning to be grateful for something. So if you're in a bad situation, you can always be grateful for skin, for eyesight. If you don't have eyesight, you can be grateful for hearing. If you can't hear, you can be grateful for eyesight. If you don't have enough money, you can be grateful that you have resources that can help you get back on your feet. If you are having difficulty finding a job, you can be grateful and imagine that the right job is right around the corner. I just hope that this video is allowing some of you, and I hope a lot of you, to understand the power that you have that is within your body right here and right now. And the only way to really experience this type of magnificent power is to let go. Is to let go of trying to prove people wrong. Is to let go of seeking validation. It's to let go of trying to be seen as the martyr. It's to let go of trying to prove to people just how sucky your life is and just how bad the other person is. You have to let that all that stuff go. And that's very hard for so many of us, because sometimes holding on to anger and resentment makes us feel safe. And it's the only thing that we have. And letting go of that makes us feel powerless. But once we really recognize that we are enough, once we realize that the universe is just listening to our frequencies, I'm hoping that when you realize how the game is played, then you want to play the game effectively rather than ineffectively. So I hope this video has helped some of you feel like you want to let go. I hope it's helped you decide what you want to look at. I hope it's helped you understand a little bit more about the neocortex and how it helps you think from a higher state of awareness, and how I personally think about the neocortex in association with higher self. The amygdala I associate the amygdala with my ego and my id. And my goal and my journey is all about learning to love myself so much and let people off the hook and just focus on what I can control. So I hope this video has helped you. Namaste, everybody. Until next time.